the Legal Corner podcast series. Welcome to today's episode of The Legal Corner, a podcast which covers a variety of legal issues to keep you informed. Hosted by attorney-at-law Colin Denoon and communications specialist Leonardo Torres.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Legal Corner podcast series. This is our final episode in season 3, and we are in the U.S. state of Texas for today's episode. We will be looking at From Prosecutor to criminal defense attorney, and our distinguished guest today is Mr. John Teakell. He is the founder of the law office of John R. Teakell. Before I bring him on, just permit me, on behalf of all of the members here at the Legal Corner podcast series, to wish each of you a Merry Christmas and season's greetings and all the very best for 2024. We will have great content lined up for you in the new year, and I hope that you will continue to join us. So I won't go into much of Mr. Teakell's bio, just to say that he is one of the top 100 lawyers in the United States. He's also one of the top 1% of lawyers. He has won several awards, including being highlighted in Forbes and Fortune magazines, the National Trial Lawyer Association Top Trial Attorneys in Texas from 2007 to 2023. So I'm going to invite John on at this time. Good day to you, John, and welcome to Legal Corner podcast series.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to our visit.
John, tell us a bit about your professional journey.
Well, my background basically was when I was going to law school at night, I worked for a large commercial bank, got experience in the credit training, lending, loan review, which is a overview, policing action of internal loans. I became a state prosecutor for a few years, and then I was wanting to get on in the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutor's office, which I eventually did. I spent about 13 years there, and then 2.5 years as a trial attorney for the Securities and Exchange Commission before I jumped out into private practice. And I've been in private practice for about 20 years, focusing on federal criminal defense and state criminal defense.
What led to you making that switch from being a state and federal prosecutor to a criminal defense attorney?
Well, I remember when I was new to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutor's office, I was very glad to get on in the federal system, the federal prosecutor's office, after being a state prosecutor. And I read a couple of places where people who were older than me had left the office, and they both said, in other offices, and they both said, I just felt like it was time to move on. And I thought that was a little strange because at that time I was thinking I would be a career prosecutor. As I got into my mid-40s and had experienced a lot of different kind of cases, I got that I felt like it was time to move on to something else. Plus, if I didn't make the jump into private practice, then I probably never would. I'd got to experience a lot of types of cases. I'd done a lot of white collar when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas, done some drug trafficking cases as well. Plus, I got recruited to go to the District of Puerto Rico to help out with the backlog of cases. I ended up being there for 3 years. So they have huge drug trafficking, huge money laundering cases, federal death penalty cases, things like that. So I got to experience a lot of different types.
Tell us a bit about your experience in Puerto Rico. How was that experience for you in Puerto Rico?
Well, the work was very stimulating in the sense that the cases are huge, and it's always something very, very significant is happening there. It's a U.S. territory, so there's the federal law enforcement presence, including the federal prosecutor's office, the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office. And it's a dumping ground for powder cocaine coming out of South America and some out of Panama. And with that came not only the drug trafficking cases, but the vying for territories within the different groups and gangs. murders of each other, murders of government witnesses, huge money laundering cases, and then, of course, federal death penalty cases, which have its own standards, its own protocol to go through the Department of Justice.
Right. Now, why did you decide to specialize in defending people facing white-collar charges?
As I said, after experiencing a few years as state prosecutor and then quite a few years as a federal prosecutor and getting to do a number of cases and types of cases in the federal system, I wanted to move on to try to use that experience to protect people's rights and defend people. And it was natural just to switch sides to go into private practice and especially focusing on federal cases. The federal system, of course, is different than the state system, and there's quite a few differences. It takes longer. The cases are more complex. It's usually a harsher system, and for all those reasons, it was time to move on. It was time to get into private practice, establish myself, which I've thankfully done, and the white-collar cases are a big mainstay of federal prosecution cases, as well as drug cases, computer intrusions, things like that. There's a lot of white-collar, and I was attracted to doing those more so than trying to just churn out only state cases, which a lot of them are street crime, assault, small thefts, prostitution, stolen credit cards, things like that.
How has your experience as a prosecutor assisted you in defending persons facing white-collar charges?
Well, aside from getting a lot of trial experience as a prosecutor and putting together cases, deciding who should be prosecuted, who shouldn't, I believe it gave me an advantage in changing sides to not only have that experience putting together a case, getting ready for trial, but in negotiating cases, understanding the system, especially the federal system, and trying to take advantage of getting in early when someone's under investigation, but they've not been formally charged yet. Because there are several advantages, or can be some advantages, from getting in early rather than just waiting until an indictment occurs down the line.
Share with us what are those advantages that you are alluding to.
Well, some of the advantages are, first, just understanding exactly or getting some detail as to why there's an investigation and what they're focusing on and what the person who's your client potentially could be looking at as far as charges, and then either dollar amounts or the quantities of substance that he would be charged with. Getting an understanding of that, plus being able to have time to get defense information to the prosecutor to show them that they're not aware of A, B, or C, or they're working on bad information if that's the case. And if it does appear to have the makings of a good case for the government, then trying to get in and tone down the case or negotiate a lower dollar amount for the sentencing guideline calculations, which gives a range of punishment for the judge to consider, or looking at trying to negotiate away certain enhancements on those sentencing guideline calculations if there's a borderline area where they may or may not apply. Those are the things that you can get in, and it gives you time to get in once you learn that the person's under investigation, which usually you'll have that time more in the federal system than in the state system.
At this point, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. John, before the break, you were just providing us with some information as it pertains to the benefits of jumping in early, just before someone may have been charged. I want us to switch gears a bit now, and I want you to tell us what are non-traditional law violations.
Well, non-traditional criminal offenses, I think, are very much included in today's federal criminal prosecutions. Those would be things that were not necessarily common law crimes or traditional basic crimes. Of course, there's always been fraud, assault, thefts, things like that. But in the federal system, you also have a lot of cases that are non-traditional or what you might call government-created crimes, such as cases that come from the ATF or the IRS, the EPA, cases that the Securities and Exchange Commission prosecutes that may become criminal, that they prosecute civilly, that may become criminal prosecutions. Some of the examples I'm talking about are such as ATF. You have some of their mainstays in their cases are possessing a firearm that's not registered, or receiving a firearm that's not registered, or selling firearms without a license, manufacturing firearms without a license.
Can you clarify what do you mean by ATF?
ATF, I'm sorry, the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They often investigate firearms-related charges, firearms and explosives. So other examples of what you might call non-traditional crimes or maybe even government-created crimes would be, say, criminal cases that come from the IRS, such as failing to file a tax return or filing false tax returns or tax evasion, things like that. Other things might be cases that come from the Environmental Protection Agency. Cases that, again, like I said, that come from the SEC, from their civil enforcement investigations might turn into criminal cases, include charges of selling unregistered securities or a person selling securities who's not registered as a broker and things like that. And then you have some other types of cases that might fit this category, such as civil actions that become criminal cases from False Claims Act violations. So there's a lot of those in the federal system that are what you might call non-traditional crimes, much more than in the state system.
Why are these perceived differently by the legal system?
Well, I think, like I said, I think the non-traditional types of cases or government-created crimes, as some people might call them, have become mainstays or more mainstays in the federal system, more so than in the state system. And I think that's because of jurisdiction and the way the federal system is set up, such as they're set up to do longer-term, more thorough investigations, whereas at the state level, a lot of it is just reactions to a robbery or an assault or a theft, something like that. And over the years, as government agencies have grown, they have expanded their authority and power. And I think that's part of the answer as to why we have most of those. Now, some of them are perceived differently. Some are not, but some are. For example, if it's just a failure to register, and it technically might be a crime, or if you have, say, an issue with your own passport as opposed to trafficking in falsely created passports. For example, you might if you're prosecuted successfully, you might be looking at probation, which is more rare in the federal system, as opposed to what the sentencing guidelines recommend. So to that extent, they sometimes are viewed a little differently.
But these types of crimes would be more serious offenses.
Are they more serious?
Yes, in terms of the penalty that they attract.
Well, sometimes no. For example, the failure to register, doing something without a license, would generally be viewed as something not as egregious as just orchestrating a fraud scheme. Now, the exception could be if you are making false statements or using your status without being licensed to do something to create or orchestrate or be a part of that fraud scheme, then it would not necessarily be viewed differently or seen as less egregious if that's the situation. If it's just an isolated incident where someone fails to register or get a license for something and it didn't cause a lot of harm, then it probably is going to be viewed differently.
And as we get ready to go, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in becoming a criminal defense attorney?
Well, if the attorney is eventually aspiring to go into criminal defense, I think it would help if they could at least spend a little bit of time in a state prosecutor's office to get some trial experience and see how cases are put together for prosecution. And then, if possible, if they're able to get on or get hired, get hired in the federal prosecutor's office to gain experience of larger cases and prolonged investigations. If not, then at least spend some time in a prosecutor's office or in a state attorney general's office or some state agency that makes referrals criminally to understand somewhat how the government works and see how realistically you can put together a case and some of the evidence that you would need.
And this has been a great conversation. Thank you very much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I would look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Corner podcast series. For more information, please visit us at our Facebook or Instagram pages or send your comments to thelegalcornerpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.